Hello everyone, my name is Steven with a V, or as some of you like to call me, Steven, and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some malicious compliance stories. Tales where following the rules lead to some just desserts. And let me just say, if you're not already subscribed to Storytime, please consider doing so. But with that being said, let's sit back, relax, and listen to some captivating Reddit stories. We can't have coffee at the teacher's cafeteria? We're just going to find somewhere else then. I work at an elite school, and I mean elite to the level of being the place many actors, politicians, and business people decided to put their children. It costs at least $40,000 a year, with many resources like a makerspace, interactive boards, an iPad by children, and some of the best teachers in the city. I'm an assistant to one of the reference head teachers in lower school, so I saw this happen very closely. My school doesn't have a teacher's lounge, and usually the teachers would only interact during the 15-minute break or during lunch at the teacher's cafeteria. Since I started there, things were like this, and no one had an issue with it until last week when we received a message from HR that made everyone extremely angry. Only the specialist teachers and administrative employees are allowed to stay at the teacher's cafeteria during the morning break. Assistants and class teachers are only to have their snack with their students and can grab their coffee in the break room from the janitorial staff. So, that means that out of nowhere, we not only lose one more space where we can rest from the classroom madness, but also we have to basically occupy a space that isn't ours. Janitorial staff also doesn't have a lot of space to rest, so it would suck for everyone. Just to have coffee? Their justification was that since the teacher staff doubled in size last year, we needed to stop occupying so much the cafeteria because it was getting too busy and people were taking too long on their breaks because of that. As far as people knew, nobody made that complaint and it was taken out of HR's butt. People were visibly angry, but nobody talked about anything until... That's when the most amazing silent malicious compliance happened for the entire teaching staff. We just grabbed our coffee and sat on the corridor in front of the teacher's cafeteria. Now imagine, just imagine, about 35 or 40 teachers sitting on the floor, everyone with coffee, bread and butter having their break like nothing happened. People would just stop by, see what was happening, and joining. Eventually, we slowly would just start again going inside the teacher's cafeteria and ignoring the HR's orders. What made them go back on what they said and allowing everyone to use the cafeteria normally. But the most impressive thing is that no one talked to each other. We just started doing the malicious compliance together like we already knew how to deal with this. When something is so ingrained in this, it's like second nature. Everybody just goes to the teacher's cafeteria and gets coffee and whatever. Things are probably just going to continue that way if there's no complaints to be had. If there's no issue, don't fix something that isn't broken. It's pretty simple, and apparently it was very easily overturned, which is great, and I'm glad that they're able to get out of the classroom madness still. You can stand for one stop. Okay. Alright, so, this happened just under 2 years ago while I was living in New York City. I was and am on the younger side of what the public expects to see for a cane user, and other than having the cane, I don't look disabled. Also, just because I know it's going to be asked, I have the cane because of hypermobility issues that have basically led to my joints not functioning as they should. Essentially, it helps keep me from falling randomly and overstraining my already taxed muscles. Also, those of you who have ridden on New York City subways might know this already, but every New York City subway car has seats that are designated as handicapped. These seats are to be vacated and given to anyone disabled, elderly, pregnant, injured, etc. You can definitely sit there if you aren't handicapped in some way, but it's a fine if you don't give up your seat when someone who needs it comes along. There's actually nothing other than manners forcing you to give up your seat in the rest of the train. That said, even in New York City, most people tend to automatically offer up a seat when they see a cane. New York City subways are especially brutal on my condition if I have to stand. The constant, unpredictable need to shift my weight leaves my muscles in agony even after a short ride. I always tried to board by the handicapped seats. That's why I at least wasn't putting someone out in the regular ones. A lot of folks will pretend not to see you, but eventually they realize you caught them staring and they offer up the seat. One day I got on the A train at Columbus Circle heading north after a long day of work. The train was pretty crowded and every seat was full. A guy was sitting in one of the handicapped seats, saw me and jumped up. The young lady standing in front of him hadn't seen me and sat down. This happens sometimes, women assuming they were being given the seat by a chivalrous man, but most women would see me and realize what had happened. The lady saw me just as the man gives her a WTF look. I hadn't planned on saying anything cause, invisible disabilities are a thing and I tend to freeze with confrontation anyway. But I must have had a puzzled look or something cause the lady goes, "Someone else can give you a seat." I look around. Every other handicap seat is occupied by someone who obviously needs it. Elderly, pregnant, etc. So I just say, well, they're all people who are supposed to be sitting in these seats. It's a fine if you sit here and aren't handicapped while someone who doesn't have a seat. I was still tired and a bit startled to be pulled into a confrontation. "Well, then it's a fine for all of them." She points to the regular seats. "No, just the ones with those signs." I point to the sign directly above her head declaring the seats as handicapped. "Well, you can stand for one stop." Now, I could have probably gotten a regular seat from someone nicer than this woman, but the subway had already started moving at this point and I needed to hold on. That and, well, I'm stubborn and petty. So I stand in the crowded car, right in front of her, my cane an inch from her kneecap for the express trip from 59th to 125th. Those of you who have experienced the joy of an express New York City subway train ride, you know they are not gentle. They speed along, bouncing, swaying, and jostling without a care in the world. I am in agony in no time flat, but I'm not the only one. Every jerk of the subway car sends my cane hard into this lady's kneecap. I don't have to intentionally do anything more than stand there. Actually, I'm trying to stay as immobile as possible, but this particular operator is driving like he's late for his own wedding. She tries to shift, but I really am all up in her business. Grab bar is right above her after all. We get to the 125th and she tries to stand up, but I don't move. She did want me to stand after all. She eventually shoves past me up out of her seat. I'm fine because the car is too crowded for me to fall or anything, but doesn't make it out of the car in time. By that time, I've gratefully taken the seat she vacated, so she has to stand until we get to 145th. At that point she got off, I assumed to get on going the other direction, and I never saw her again. Good on OP for this one. I would have preferred if OP declared that they jammed that cane into their knee a little bit more, honestly. Such a rude person, you gotta be caring for these people. Taking the subway is not easy on a number of people with bad disabilities. Even if it isn't blaringly obvious, be a considerate human being and offer the seat up. Just accept it, hold on to the rail, and just be a bigger person. Get mad at me for not wasting your time? Here you go. I work at a place that farms a certain type of animal used in research. These animals live lives of luxury, but every once in a while they get hurt due to fighting amongst themselves or being the curious species that they are. This farm has its own veterinary clinic with a couple of vets and a few vet techs. My job. We start each morning with a meeting in which we go over our game plan for the day. After the meeting, we begin with pulling the animals observed the day before that may require a health check that are non-emergent cases. All emergent cases, such as big lacerations, cases of dehydration, or being rejected by their housemates, are pulled from their homes immediately regardless of time of day. If something is observed by a vet tech later in the day that isn't an emergency and the animal can wait until the next day, we write it down on a big board so that they get to the clinic next morning. Our rule of thumb is that if it's not something we would personally go to the hospital or doctor for, we would just continue to monitor the animal or schedule it for a pull the next morning and do an exam. Examples being small lacerations that aren't actively bleeding, don't look infected, and are already scabby would be a continuous monitoring until it's completely healed. If the animal is favoring a limb but there is no apparent trauma, we would monitor for the next day or so, and if the animal was still favoring, we would pull it out. Okay, on to the compliance. This particular morning meeting, one of the higher up vets was laying into us about pulling any and everything we see right when we see it. Some of the other vet tech were asking for clarity on this demand, but was met with the vet just repeating the words, "Pull everything the day of." So we left the meeting and went on to our daily duties. It was as if everyone had the same maliciously compliant idea all at once. We pulled everything. Small and almost healed scratches. This animal looked a little down. This animal wasn't eating in the 5 minutes I was looking at it. By noon, all of the clinics were overflowing with patients. The vet that made the demand was sent majority of the cases and seemed very distressed. He even called a few techs into the clinic to return the animals before they were checked in. The next morning, we got a lecture about using discretion and that if the animal is not in distress and it is not one of these emergent cases, please use the pull board to pull the next day. One of the techs that brought in the most animals the day prior said, "So you want us to do what we were already doing prior to your lecture yesterday? Okay, gotcha." I wanted to add that I wasn't directly involved in this malicious compliance as I was still in training and therefore not qualified to make the official call to pull the animal. But I did help find the tiniest of scratches and reported them to my trainer. I'm also adding that the quality of care for the animals that truly needed care was not compromised with our antics. Majority of the pulls everyone made were BS pulls and they were allowed to return to groups almost immediately. It just goes to show, if you're going to micromanage and overmanage and whatnot, it's going to lead to some dissatisfaction and probably not the results you're hoping for. Different rules for different departments at Target. In high school in the mid-late 90s, I worked at Target. At the time, and possibly still today, I don't actually know, Target divided their departments into hard lines and soft lines. Soft lines is basically all the clothes and apparel type departments, and hard lines was everything else. Hard lines was further divided into A and B, with one being the home goods type stuff like chintzy decorative stuff, soaps and cleaning supplies, and the other basically toys, hardwares, and electronics. Target pushed the team culture to an obsessive degree and the store managers were zealots except for when it came time to close. Often the store was trashed and the closing staff had to keep working well past closing to get the store in a proper state, with hard lines often hurting the most and toys absolutely the worst. Basically, everyone had to stay and fix the shelves till it was done, your department or not. But this rule didn't apply to the soft lines or the cashiers. They left whenever they were done, usually around 10:30 p.m. Hardlines was often there till 1 a.m. during holidays, but there was occasionally a clothing sale, and Softlines was equally a mess. Hardlines was always required to help Softlines because that's the team method. Softlines managers, on the other hand, would refuse to assist Hardlines ever despite the team rules. I was in Hardlines and suffering in school because of the late nights and told my managers I needed to be leaving when my shift ended without exception. They refused because this wasn't teamwork speak and told me that if I wanted to keep my job that I would go home when my department goes home. So I transferred and started taking Softlines shifts instead. 10 p.m. rolls around, one big sale day for hardware and Softlines is done and packing up by 10:15. I go up to clock out and am told that the store leader, who is also the Hardlines manager, is calling on the radio for me to go help sort the shelves. I responded that my department is done and that he told me that I leave when my department is done, went home, and went to sleep. I still failed 2 morning classes though because the damage had been done. Don't work too close at Target if you care about your grades. Yeah, none of that sits well with me, especially when a lot of the people that are working at Target are probably going to be quite frequently younger people and high school people that need valuable sleep time for their academics. I just think it's pretty ridiculous that they would be forcing high school people that have class basically in the morning to stay till 1 a.m. because that's the team whatever it is. It just does not sit well with me. It sounds kind of like some brainwashing scheme, like you gotta buy into the Target team method. It does not sit well with me. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today for the Storytime channel. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and leave any feedback you can in the comments below. We of course appreciate it, and thank you again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.